Hello and welcome to Pause for Payments. I'm Christy Duncan, and I'm really excited to welcome you here to a very special edition of Pause for Payments sponsored by Microsoft. There's a global awakening to the sustainability factor in all that we do. We believe that digital payments can help to support sustainable economic growth, financial inclusion, and responsible consumption, all of which support the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'm delighted to welcome this panel as we explore the global concepts of financial inclusion, responsible consumption, and sustainable economic growth in a post-COVID world, and what we as leaders in the payments ecosystem can do to further these goals that are imperative to a sustainable future. Now over to you, Tracy.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Christy and Women in Payments, for giving us the opportunity to talk about this really emerging and important topic, not just within financial services and within the payments industry, but really all industries globally. And for those of you that haven't met me before, I'm delighted to be here moderating this panel. My name is Tracy Lagasse, and I'm the industry executive covering the financial services market within Microsoft Canada. Some of you may be aware of some of the big, bold, very public commitments our company, Microsoft, has made as it relates to sustainability and corporate responsibility recently, but it really has been core to our priorities for a number of years. However, when we look back at the year that 2020 was, with a global health crisis, an economic crisis, persistent systemic racism, injustices, inequalities, and of course, some of the most devastating impacts that we've seen so far as a result of climate change, it really does necessitate the need for us to have these types of conversations and raise awareness about what these issues are, the impacts, and how we can get involved. And maybe that sounded a little bit pessimistic, but the optimistic side of me and the technologist side of me also says that we have a bit of an opportunity, once in a generation perhaps, opportunity to harness the power of technology and our voices to really address some of these complex, and they are complex, challenges that are facing our people and our planet today. The very clear message is that no one organization, no one country, no one industry segment can really address these challenges on their own. So it's really important for us to understand how within our own industry, how within our own roles, we can actually bring assets to the table to be able to impact change. And so with that in mind, we've assembled this amazing panel for you today with deep subject matter expertise within the financial services industry, within the payments industry, to share some of their insights, perspectives, experiences, and hopefully it serves to educate, inform, maybe inspire those of us within financial services and the payments industry about how we can come together, collaborate, and increase our impact on ESG initiatives. So with that in mind, I'm going to get right to introducing the panel here today, or having them introduce themselves. So maybe over to you, Margaret, just for a quick intro.
Great. Thanks so much, Tracy. And thanks to Women in Payments. Thrilled to be here. I'm Margaret Weichert. I am the Managing Director and North American Payments Lead at Accenture. And like Tracy, I'm thrilled to talk about this topic. At Accenture, corporate social responsibility is absolutely fundamental to who we are as a firm, not only because it is important to our clients and the societies in which we operate, but it's important to our people. We have a global workforce of over 500,000 employees, most of whom are fairly young and early in their careers, and they care about the issues of environment, social justice, and sustainability for the future. And that is something that is absolutely critical to being able to maintain our leadership as a leading place to work and attract the talent we need to do our work. So I'm thrilled to talk about this topic and be joined with some of the great leading lights on the subject.
Thanks, Margaret. Sukh?
Thank you, Tracy. Hi, everyone. I'm Sukhmani, I go by Sukh, and I'm responsible for digital payments and cybersecurity solutions at Mastercard Canada. And like Margaret mentioned, sustainability is also very important to Mastercard. We touch almost 3 billion consumers globally. So we want to bring the power of our network, our partnerships, and our products to bear when it comes to the topic of sustainability. We want to return more to the environment than we take from it. We want to build a digitally inclusive economy where everyone can participate. So very excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Suk. Pamela.
Hi, and thank you again to Women in Payments, and really looking forward to this panel in particular. I'm a passionate advocate for sustainability. I'm a founding board advisory member for the Institute of Sustainable Finance in Canada, as well as I sit on the Global Advisory Council for the Prince of Wales Accounting for Sustainability initiative. And until recently, I am the former Chief Financial Officer and Corporate Strategy Officer for Payments Canada. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pamela. And Laura.
Thank you again to Women in Payments for having me here. Laura Reinhold, I lead the BMO for Women program, which is Bank of Montreal's customer segment program that's focused on women entrepreneurs and women investors and removing financial barriers for them in the financial system.
Great. Thanks, Laura. And I'm going to come right back to you with our first question. But hopefully, the audience can see we have a very diverse set of perspectives here, even within the payments industry. And as we were prepping for this session, it really did inspire me to hear all of these stories about how these different facets of our payments industry and our financial services, and just thought about the challenges and opportunities that persisted. So, but before I get to letting the panelists share some of their successes, challenges, and perspectives, I thought we'd start at a very high level because it is such a broad topic. And so maybe, Laura, I'm going to start with you with this one. So just high level, maybe, just a bit under a minute or so, we'll go through each of the panelists. Why is ESG and sustainability so important for our industry? And where do you think our industry could have the biggest impact?
Well, first, I think that the financial industry as a whole, and then if you look at it through the payments lens, there's a big intersectionality in the 3 E's of sustainability with the ecology, economy, and equity. There's a massive intersection there and what we could be doing. And as far as the opportunity perspective with ESG, looking at it through our lens, so for a North American bank, essentially, and through my own lens through the BMO for Women program, there's a lot of opportunity with us for ESG investing for women. Women at a much higher rate than men care about ESG investing and what companies are doing to do better with the environment and within the social and equity perspective.
You know what? I didn't know that, so it makes me even prouder to be a female in technology and payments. So thanks for that tidbit today. Maybe with that one, I'll go over to you, Pamela, for next comment.
Thanks. So sustainability is everywhere. We only have one planet with this one ball of energy and space to breathe. And I've been involved with sustainability for many years in many different facets. And I think combining the current climate crisis and what we need to do and harness the energies of the planet, particularly where financial services can come in. As Laura mentioned, investing is huge, and using your investments to speak with your voice, as well as how we can link financial services in supply chains for both the economy as well as for social issues, which I'm sure we'll get into shortly in this discussion. So being able to create value on many different levels. So one often refers to the 6 capitals within value creation and ESG, and the sustainability development goals developed at the United Nations. So I think that's all very important, and financial services, money does make the world go round in many cases. And so speaking with our financial and economic power is really important.
Thanks, Pamela. Suk, maybe I'll go to you next.
For sure. Good points raised so far. The 2 things that I would say from our perspective: 1, economic growth cannot come at the expense of the environment. So the quality and nature of our future is deeply linked to the health and well-being of our planet. And the last year has more than exemplified that. And then the second I would say is that the only sustainable growth is inclusive growth. So we need to systematically address the issue of inequality in the financial system. And sometimes when you think about that, you think about the world outside of Canada, but even in Canada itself, according to World Bank's index, the most recent one from 2017 estimated that 5% of the population is underbanked. So there's room to improve and work that we can do, which is why Mastercard, we are committed to be a force of good and to make sure people and communities, business, as well as the planet can thrive with our collective efforts.
Yeah, really a holistic view there, and some great sort of insights in terms of how they're all interconnected. Margaret, over to you.
Sure. So again, I couldn't agree more with the points that have been raised. I think I'll add a couple additional ones that, in addition to all the sort of moral or ethical elements of ESG, there's some very intensely practical business implications of a focus like this. The workforce and kind of the future of my company, but also many other companies, you know, are the people who have the skills and the alignment with the needs of businesses in the 21st century. And these tend to be younger people with sort of a digital native orientation. And those individuals care about these issues. So to attract them as employees or to attract them as customers, it's critical to help not only our own business, but our clients align to those perspectives. I think the other issue is this isn't a theoretical construct, particularly in more mature economies with slower population growth that shareholders require in payments. The number one thing that drives historically growth in electronic payment revenues has been population growth. If your population isn't growing at rates that it might have done, 30 years ago, you need to deepen relationships. You need to look to be more inclusive and to add more value. And that's a very critical piece that I think, the inclusion component, even in financial services in Canada, in North America, has to be about deepening, electronic banking relationships with the underserved populations.
Yeah, I love the way, so all of the answers are, again, it reminds me of a conversation I had with one of my colleagues, and, Laura, you referred to the 3 E's, and I'm not sure if this was new, but he sort of referred to it as the 3 P's when we're coming together, which is the, people, planet, and profits. It's a very sensitive topic to talk about, sort of how we keep at the forefront these ESG, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, our people and our planet at the forefront, but also, link that back to what that means to business, profitability, economies as well. And so it's a balance. And, that I think leads very nicely into our next question, where we sort of let's take it one level deeper. And, Pamela, I'll give you the heads up. I'm going to throw to you first on this one. And there's even just this week, there's been a number of articles, when we look at the rise of digital payments globally, it was happening well before the pandemic. I think last week, the Financial Post here in Canada did an interview with Interac, where they were tracking something in the neighborhood. I'm pretty certain it said 55% increase in e-transfers. So just that continued growth, and I would say explosion of digital payments. And you see a lot of media right now. I think there's a lot of opportunity. So when you talk about the profits and the business and the economy, there's a lot of opportunity that exists with that. But on the other side, there's also a lot of impacts. And so what I'm super curious about, and please, panelists, use this as an opportunity if you'd like to share any of the stories of how you've addressed some of this. But with ESG linked to the rise in digital payments, what do you think the impacts and opportunities are related to ESG and digital payments?
Well, thanks, Tracy. I mean, there's a lot there. And first, absolutely, you're correct. And if you look at the Payments Canada Methods and Trends report they put out every year, cash since 2014 to 2019, and this is even before the pandemic started. That's the data, the most current data, though there have been some updates since. Cash has declined almost 40%. And you're absolutely right. Online transfers in that 5-year period have gone up 563% from a volume perspective. So huge. Clearly, that's having an impact on the economy, only accelerated by the pandemic. People's requirement really to shop online, and therefore more e-commerce, more digital payments, which is good for our businesses, but potentially good as well. And what I like to think about is where we're going in the future with respect to digital payments and the capabilities of the real-time payment system that is coming, and ISO 20022, which will allow richer data to go with payment remittances and the ability to link data. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to link sustainability data right into the payments remittance. So you can look at, as an example, the provenance or the whole supply chain, and you can ask for and get relevant data that comes right into your systems automatically, and use the power of big data to harness both the payment as well as the information that goes with the payment and what you're purchasing. So if you think of those organizations with potentially extended supply chains, thinking textile manufacturers, grocers, and food production that occurs worldwide, and the sourcing of the raw materials for those products, I think there is a lot of opportunity out there. So I'm excited to see what those technological innovations have to bring. And on the other side, for individuals who are, as Suk mentioned earlier, underbanked, ensuring that we bring them along in the process as well, so no one is left behind in a rising digital payments economy, and ensuring everyone has fair and equal access to currency, to transactions, to savings products to thrive.
Yeah, thanks, Pamela. It is quite exciting, and I could probably spend much of this session trying to unpack all of the opportunities that we have for payments data and use cases really to impact it, and what we see coming. It is definitely very interesting and presents its own set of, I would say, industry challenges when it comes to getting access and standardizing that. But, Margaret, maybe I'll go next in terms of, where you sort of see, the correlation between the rise of digital payments and the impacts and opportunities it creates.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about innovation around payments is it enables new business models and new ways of both including people and changing how that need fulfillment happens. So an example I would like to use is the rise of certain types of electronic payment, and particularly platforms that allow people in rural communities to access, a new means of living by, selling crafts. I think there are a lot of specialty businesses that have grown up over time, but really accelerated during the pandemic from a remote standpoint. Payment systems are absolutely key to supporting the ability for me to buy something from a tribal Canada producer that may be very far away from a transportation grid or a telecommunications grid, and be able to make electronic payments and support that. And it brings them into the global economy, and it also reduces what I call sort of truck rolls and car rolls to drive people into centralized hubs. So a lot of the distributed models that have emerged around electronic payments, PayPal is a great example, Venmo is a great example, are enabling people to actually work differently, support their families where they are without having to do big, more environmentally impactful commutes.
Yeah. And Suk, I'm especially, based on our pre-conversations and preferences, I'm also really interested in your perspective, coming from sort of the card perspective as well, in terms of, those impacts with this migration to digital payments. and of course, then the opportunities it creates.
Absolutely. And I want to underscore what an incredible year we've had last year in terms of spend shifting to e-commerce. In fact, Mastercard numbers, we saw almost 45% of our switch volume to be card not present, as we like to call it, or e-commerce, as you're familiar with, globally. These are big numbers of 45%. So of course, there's been a massive shift, and a recent study underscored that a large population of adults, 85%, stated that they're willing to take personal action to combat environmental and sustainability issues in 2021. So you're seeing the shift, you're seeing the consumer be very aware and in tune with what's happening and willing to take action, which is why what we did is that we have recently announced in partnership with a fintech known as Economy, a feature that our banks can leverage, and it's called a carbon calculator. And the idea is that by enabling this feature for consumers, they can receive a snapshot of their carbon emissions generated by the purchases across spending categories. So that's a great way to give people tools, people who want to participate in improving sustainability. So that's something that that's very concrete that we're bringing to market. It's an interesting way to look at the problem. And the other thing that I would say, something Margaret mentioned around newer ways around engaging the underbanked or people who haven't been part of the digital economy in the past. What we've also done, of course, last year we committed or expanded rather our commitment around bringing people and small businesses into the digital economy fold. So we expanded our commitment to connect over 1 billion people, 50 million small businesses to the digital economy by 2025. And in that bucket, supporting 25 million women entrepreneurs. And so we've made that broad commitment, but like the how of it, there's some examples that I could share of how we've done it in the past, taking advantage of technologies like QR in Africa, giving people simple ways to pay and bring them into the digital economy. We've also done work where you can use solar power or give affordable solar power and clean solar energy so that people can again connect with the digital economy. So these are just some ways we're trying to act against this desire that the consumers have and this overarching backdrop that we are all living with, this heightened awareness around the impact of our digital spending that is having on the environment.
Yeah, and these sort of one of the common themes I'm seeing emerge, and Laura, before I get to you with this one, sort of some of the common themes without necessarily saying it, I can hear all of you are thinking about the ways to make sure that as we move forward and create these new opportunities, we're recognizing or at least aware of the concerns and challenges associated with financial inclusion, as well as the impacts that enabling digital payments could have, whether they were included or not included prior to this rise in digital payments. So how do we actually sort of move that entire market forward, which is, I guess, the optimistic way of addressing what we're all recognizing as a bit of a risk and a challenge as the world sort of digitizes its payments. And so Laura, over to you. I know you have a specific focus as well in the inclusion side of it. I don't want to restrict you to that, but sort of what are you seeing in terms of impacts or opportunities with the rise of digital payments?
First, I'm actually going to speak more at a global level and then just drop down a little bit more into what we're doing specifically. And it's not really global payments perspective, but it is access to capital, what we're doing. We have to remember that according to the World Economic Forum and their gender equality report, there's a large percentage of women in the world that can't even own their own bank account or hold assets in their own name or permitted to have their own ID. And 1 in 5 unbanked women in the world have stated the lack of ID as the issue in not having a bank account. And so I think that there's an opportunity in the digital world to be able to try to solve for that. Women in the global south are also going to be impacted more by massive climate events. Because of they're living in regions and living in poverty that's going to cause these impacts to them. Conversely, we're also seeing that women entrepreneurs are creating businesses that are solving local issues that could actually be elevated up and scaled to solve global problems. And so what we're doing right now, because we do know that women still have a lack of access to capital, we've actually just created a grant program that's for Canadian women entrepreneurs as well as US entrepreneurs in specific states that we do business in. And we're going to be focusing it purely on sustainability outcomes. So whether it involves any one of the 3 E's, so to speak. So it's a pretty broad, it's not just going to be focused on climate, but we're looking for women that are looking to solve for major global issues to actually help give capital to them to help them move their business along. And again, that's pretty simple. It's not looking in the digital payments, but it is still trying to solve for the issue that they're still lacking access to capital. One of the things I am seeing that's interesting, like with Shopify, when you go into their shop app now, you can actually sort by Black-owned business or Indigenous-owned business, and they're actually helping you find businesses that are owned by historically underrepresented populations. And they also offer credit that's based on your sales that come through their system. So they're looking at solving for those sort of issues as well through their own platform. So it's interesting to see what's happening for that financial inclusion, whether it's very almost old school with granting or looking at it through like the digital channels.
Yeah, and you know what, you're really segueing nicely into sort of our next topic, and I don't know if that would actually be your answer, Laura. So I'll leave you to the end on this one and maybe go to Sukh. But you're really highlighting, and I think this is the intent as well of our webinar today, which is within financial services and within the payments industry, you know, recognizing that we all have roles to play individually, organizationally, sector-wise. Are there some unique things that our industries, our positions, our companies, you know, definitely from a data perspective, technology perspective, we see that, but are there some unique opportunities that our industry has the opportunity to address? And Sukh, you mentioned some work that you're doing with your cards, maybe even more on that or more ideas. So why don't I start with you in terms of your thoughts on sort of the uniqueness of our industry of where we can contribute?
For sure, for sure. I think what's unique about our industry is 2 things. One, we touch a lot of consumers. And specifically in Canada, like I said, you know, they're underbanked individuals, but you know, there's still a lot of population of banks, so we have the opportunity to interact with such a large base of consumers and harness their power as they're willing to take action. And the second is we are all in an industry where we benefit from a network of like-minded individuals, of organizations that participate in our services that we have to provide. So these are 2 very important or potent sources that we can harness in this journey of ours. So 2 examples that I'll share of how we're doing this is, it's kind of unique, but to Mastercard, given we are a cards organization, but we recently, actually earlier this week, announced, we were talking just about digital payments, but this is more on the plastic side of things. You know, like each card is plastic ultimately, right? So actually on June 2nd, we just announced a brand mark that can appear on cards when they leverage plastics or are made out of sustainable material. So ocean safe plastics or biodegradable kind of pieces of polyester. So those and these brand marks, you know, they're obviously vetted by third party before they're granted and all that. There's proper due diligence processes behind that. But we are very conscious of the fact that if we're touching 3 billion cardholders globally and they're carrying around a piece of plastic in their pocket, like we want even that piece or bit to be as sustainable as it can be. So that's just a very small example. But again, if you're going to touch that many individuals, like even if a small change that we can make can carry a lot of weight. So that's one thing that I would share. The other thing that I would share, like I said, about the network and how we are interconnected, especially in this industry, there's power in coalitions. So all of us coming together when we have similar objectives, similar goals, we can have a larger impact. And to that, we launched, I believe earlier last year, our Priceless Planet Coalition. And the idea is by bringing our partners, like-minded individuals, and BMO is actually one of our first partners here in Canada, joining the coalition, the goal is to plant 100 million trees by next year. So it's hard for one organization to do it. I think together we can, all hit that goal. So those two things I would say, harnessing the power where we touch cardholders or consumers, individuals, and then harnessing the power right now with our partners.
Yeah, it's a great example of, I love the aspect of the uniqueness of leveraging your asset, which is the sheer number of end users and consumers you have, and empowering them to also impact their sort of personal goals as it relates to sustainability and ESG. So organizationally connected to empowering consumers, definitely a unique aspect of our industry. Pamela, your thoughts on the uniqueness of payments?
I think there's such an opportunity in the personal landscape, as Suk just so eloquently went through with the efforts of Mastercard, but corporately as well, things like being able to capitalize on the payment systems that you use to demand more information as it becomes available with the new technology, more data, being able to trace through your transactions. And if you have an extended supply chain, have that payment vehicle and that remittance information as an extra pair of eyes to verify what's happening in your system. And therefore, once you have that data, and payments is so data rich, and we have so much information as these organizations, harness that data, as I think Suk again said, with coalition power. And once you have that data, then you can measure things, and then you can create a trend and a benchmark and a target and move towards improvement. So it's all about what gets measured gets managed, and just the sheer amount of data that we are going to be able to see through the payment systems will allow and permit us to really catapult off of that to make really sustained targets and show and demonstrate continuous improvement.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The amount of data that we're anticipating to be able to have access to, and now with, obviously with some leading edge technologies to be able to actually analyze, aggregate, share, and create these insights, I think will be a game changer, and something that's going to position people with this really rich payments data, whether it's internal or whether it's supply chain driven, to really differentiate. Maybe over to you, Margaret, on this one as well, in terms of sort of unique sort of focus in the payments industry.
Sure. So two areas that are highly related, where we're spending a lot of time, is looking at some of the structural impediments to electronification of payments, where there's still a lot of paper, and heavily that's impacted in two places. One, underserved populations on the retail side, and two, businesses. And interestingly enough, new technology related to distributed ledger in different ways is helping us think about the future around that. So one, Accenture is, we I think announced last month, some pilots we're doing around central bank digital currency and the digital dollar project, to very specifically focus on inclusion related issues that affect populations that are more likely to use paper-based payments. So I think that's a super interesting area of evolution. The other thing we're doing is we're looking at trade and supply chain payments, which are still very intensive on paper-based documentation that goes along with the payment itself. And what we're seeing is a combination of interest in products like Mastercard has a virtual card product, a number of payment brands have virtual card products that enable seamless, appropriately priced payments around trade and supply chain. In addition, combining the payment with more distributed ledger technology around multi-party blockchain solutions that reduce the need for the paper, not only enable us to securely do global trade, for example, that may allow smaller vendors to be part of a global supply chain that previously would have required tons of paper documentation to authenticate and kind of validate from a money laundering and foreign asset control kind of perspective. We can automate a lot of that and look at end-to-end supply chains in a much more holistic way. So those are two areas that I'm really bullish on. I think overall secular trends around digital payments are good for the environment, and they're good for business.
Yeah, the concept, you're causing me to reflect on my sort of career and early days and starting in sort of copier businesses and the Xeroxes, where I thought 20 years ago I needed to get out of it because paper was going away. And the more entrenched you become in the banking industry, financial services, you realize how important that the information, the documents, the flows. So the opportunity to actually re-engineer some of those processes not only could have an impact on sort of the paper and the digitization, but the information and the overall just efficiency and inclusion in the industry. So, those are some.
And why we need the paper. A lot of it relates to regulation around things like money laundering.
Oh yeah, and that was something that came to mind afterwards when we were talking, like the sort of regulatory sort of role and sort of impact they could potentially have or should have, or involvement they should have in helping the industry. And Laura, over to you for sort of closing thoughts on this one. I think you highlighted a really interesting uniqueness in terms of how the financial services industry can really help, in particular, female and women-led or minority organizations sort of get engaged. Are there any other things that come to mind for you in terms of the uniqueness that our industry can bring to the table?
Well, I do know, like, just using one of our own products that we created in the last couple of years, for example, like minimizing paper and the need for providing all of, if you come to us for a business loan, you have to provide all of this documentation and so on. And it hasn't completely eliminated it, but with the Business Express, it's just up to a certain amount. And then it gets adjudicated through artificial intelligence, looking at the personal credit history and so on of the business owner. So we are starting to reduce those barriers in accessing credit for business owners. And I know there's a lot of talk about how bias is baked into artificial intelligence because what goes in comes out. But ideally, over time, as we start to become more aware of those biases put into the AI, it will eliminate it so that it is easier for underbanked, underserved individuals to have access to credit as business owners. I did want to talk a bit about the coalition concept, and we were one of the first organizations to sign on for the Priceless Planet, but we've also just recently announced a Climate Institute as well. And the goal of that is to basically act as a catalyst to bring together thought leaders to look at how we as financial institutions can help our clients in industries like mining and oil and gas and so on start to move towards having cleaner solutions. And so that's kind of where we're starting to look from a financial institution perspective when it comes to sustainability and so on. But one other thing I wanted to add on from a consumer perspective, and I'm a consumer that is very much focused on sustainability and making less of an impact on the planet, it is a lot of work to seek out companies to purchase from and to get an understanding of what that impact my purchase is going to make on the planet or on some business. And the things, carbon is one thing, but I'm also thinking like water usage. Like a pair of jeans takes an extraordinary amount of water. And so I think that in the payments industry, as people are just mindlessly, putting in their credit card number online, there's an opportunity for that data to be used to say, did you know that this is it's not just your carbon footprint, you're using, X gallons of water for that purchase. So that's just from a consumer perspective.
Thanks, Laura. And I don't know, Sue, before I go to the next question, if you had any comments on that. I know that's something that, your products are aiming to also target.
Yeah, I'd agree with Laura. I think companies can do more. We need to further integrate climate change into our everyday thinking. She mentioned about going beyond the carbon footprint, and yeah, studies show that people, our global respondents, they want to reduce waste. That's a priority. They want to reduce air and water pollution, tackling plastic, So all of these things are top of mind for the users of our products. So these should be top of mind for us as well. So I completely agree.
Yeah, and maybe then, Suk, I'll continue on that sort of thought with you for the next topic I really wanted to address. And, when we look at the broadness of ESG and, it's still very, from my perspective anyway, still very early days and early maturity with a lot of industries in terms of what we can be doing and even our knowledge. And so, I'm curious, based on your experience to date, where do you think organizations are making progress? And perhaps where do you think the challenges and opportunities are? From a Microsoft technology perspective, some of the challenges for us we see are really around, we would consider it the data challenge. There's amazing things you can do if you can actually get at the data and their standardizations. But, maybe over to you to say, what are you seeing and learning in terms of progress, or if you want to focus on the challenges and opportunities next. Super interested.
For sure. Yeah, like I briefly mentioned, there's more organizations can do and rally behind causes that are actually impactful and meaningful, because the well-being of this planet is critical to the success of all of us and our futures as individuals, but also organizations. So I think when an organization sets a very clear strategy and they put, the might of their business behind it, that's when things are going, where we see things going well. And it's not just about, managing your own organization's carbon footprint or, your own organization's ESG posture, but thinking about how you can do it so that it's part of doing business. I think earlier in the conversation, Margaret mentioned something to this effect around, profits, and can you tie ESG to profits? And that's a concept that Mastercard thinks a lot about, how, it's not a topic on the side of the table where you need to check a box, but rather how is that a part of way of us doing our business? And that's why we've spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, what does this mean from our product development standpoint? I gave the example of the cards. Another example that I thought was really interesting, and I'll share and extend the definition of sustainability a little bit into conservation, is that we did recently launch another card program where it's actually very, I find it very interesting and thought-provoking, where you have, it's again, a partnership, and it's a partnership that is aimed at raising awareness around critically endangered species with the wildlife impact. It's called the Wildlife Impact Card Program. And the idea is that the cards carry images of critically endangered species, and the expiry date of the card is actually by when we would expect that species to go extinct.
Wow.
So the card actually, it's a gift card. You can use it. You can give it to your, you use it in whatever context you want as a gift card. But the idea is, it carries a very powerful message along with it, as to that the species might go endangered before the card even expires. So it's just things like that, where we're really thinking about every single interaction and product development and putting our ESG thinking into it. The other thing that we have also done is, and I think other organizations have also done this, tying executive compensation to ESG goals.
Mm.
So when you do that, you're encouraging or incentivizing the right kind of movement, I would say. So those are two examples that I would quickly share. And then in terms of challenges, I agree with you on the data piece of it. You can only go so far with the data without now getting into people's very personal information. So you have to stay at a level of aggregation that everybody feels comfortable with. So you may not be able to very discreetly differentiate if Tracy bought a lawnmower from this warehouse store that's gas guzzling versus was she only walking out with fruits and vegetables. That stores seem to provide that as well. So there's only that much detail you want to go into to protect your privacy. But I think even at an aggregate category level, there's things that you can do with data, leverage data to at least guide her, between different categories, which ones are better for the environment versus not. So I think that's the data challenge, of course. And then, like I said, there's room to do more. And I just hope that more and more organizations step up to the challenge, because the planet is counting on us. our users of our services are counting on us, and so that's where I leave that.
Yeah, I would love to have more time, because as a personal interest in product development and innovation, I'm curious how, from a product perspective, you really sort of prioritized and got the business cases and the approvals and really, moved some of these really innovative ideas through to the market, and did so, with those challenges that I identified, and not only sort of in local markets, but also, launching these things globally, I'm sure brings on its whole new range of challenges. Margaret, I'm going to go to you next on this, because Sue had sort of mentioned something you had said earlier. And really, when I think about, your sort of role and perspective, North America wide, and sort of, sort of strategic consulting on the strategies that our customers are forming as it relates to this, I'm wondering your thoughts on, what are you seeing in terms of progress, like what's working, and or where are the opportunities that still exist for focus?
So I actually think the thing that reflects the greatest progress in the last, call it 3-4 years, is the G in ESG. So a lot of people ask the question, what is governance doing in the same bucket as these other sort of, ethical questions? And I think that, the core point, and I've spent a lot of time across my career thinking about the intersection between corporates and an engine that is very practical at getting stuff done, and social responsibility. And it comes down to this governance question. And banking and financial services in general is probably the best engine for solving systems level complex equations and making money while doing it. And frankly, allocating the capital to solve those problems is driven by the profit motive, but governance is what kind of creates the guardrails around that profit motive. And so in the response to financial crises, we have regulatory activities that inform governance. In the response to desires at a national or regional level to change some social targets, we've seen other forms of governance enter, particularly the payment system. I think Europe is a very interesting example where governance issues around creating a European central union and a true integrated set of economies, created a number of payment system innovations. And now we have governance elements coming around open banking and, diversity, inclusion, and social responsibility and environment. And it's not just enough to say, okay, compensate or punish executives if you don't change what's happening at the board, if you don't change what's happening in the capital markets around these things. And so that is part of what I like about what Laura is doing on the availability of capital, but there's elements around regulation. And I am super excited about the leadership that corporates have played, and it's enlightened self-interest. You don't have to believe that they're inherently white knight types. You only need to believe that they think it's good for business and it actually makes change happen.
Yeah, I'm absolutely loving the amount of research content, voices in the market that are really demonstrating that it's good for business across a number of aspects. But I think to your point, it's a maturity in terms of that migration to focus on the governance as well. And so
diverse boards, by the way, are more likely to make that connection between these social responsibility elements and profit.
I I would completely agree, and I think with this group of panelists, we would also concur with that that opinion. Maybe Pamela and Laura, I'll go Pamela to you next. I want to get everyone's answers in. I think we'll probably be running a little short on time, but really would love to hear where you think that there's progress and where we need to focus. And then I will come back to everyone for a bit of a closing remark as well.
Well, thanks, Tracy. And I agree, of course, with my fellow panelists. And I see so much momentum that is gathering steam. And I believe we've really hit a tipping point on the corporate level with respect to sustainability. It was a bit of a fringe topic 5-6 years ago, has been gaining ground ever since. And certainly the pandemic and certain climate crises have propelled corporate worlds into more of a sustainable posture, which is fantastic. I agree, Margaret, absolutely. I think the governance piece is one in Canada. I think we're generally pretty proud of our accomplishments in governance, more to do, but it is tone from the top. And that is so important in getting change throughout an organization. I also agree, Suk, with the idea of tying compensation and executives, because what gets measured gets managed or changed in this case. And there is a lot that my colleagues sort of in the sustainable space in finance are doing. We did talk about, or somebody did reference, water usage, particularly in the textiles business. Levi's is one really great example that measures their water and has completely changed their approach to manufacturing their jeans and how they treat them, really reducing their water, ensuring that in their offshore factories, they are plowing profits back into those communities, educating people on new technologies, on bringing up their standard of living and so forth. There are these companies that are truly committed, and that is a big part of what accounting for sustainability is all about as well, because what gets measured gets managed. And so that offers a really great portal and opportunity to share ideas and to make change that is measurable and manageable, as well as all of the measurement standards that we are seeing come out. So there's SASB is probably the most well-known, or the Task Force for Climate Related Financial Disclosures, PRI for the large investment community, which of course also can have a huge impact on what we're seeing from a sustainability perspective. And then leveraging the technology and innovation that is happening in the world to harness and to gather and to make more efficient all of this data that everybody is clamoring for, and to provide the basis so that we can measure what matters. So I'm very excited. Lots more work to do, of course. And when you think of social and environmental things, obviously we go to oil, or we think about tobacco, but there are other large social issues that are facing us. So obesity in North America in particular, textile usage and waste, which has also been referenced, is really important, or even just sugar consumption. And there's lots that we can do, but I think so much has been done, and there's a real momentum underway, and I'm really excited for what I see is not sustainable finance, sustainable payments, or sustainable business, just good business.
Those are some great opportunities and a very optimistic future to look forward to there. Laura.
I've actually seen a few challenges, and going back to maybe some of the comments on governance, like we're talking, if we're going into a primarily digital economy, there's the governance over data privacy is going to have to become even more of a priority. Like bad actors are becoming more and more sophisticated in doing things like porting your cell phone number that you use as your second your confirmation for PayPal, so that they can take over your PayPal account and your identity in some cases. Like there's a lot of things like that are happening. And then the other one I've thought a lot about, especially in the last year, living right down in town Toronto and seeing the homelessness. If we're moving towards more of a cashless society, And I ran into this myself when the way I budget, sometimes I'll only pay cash for things so that I'm not just mindlessly spending. The number of stores that don't take cash anymore, you're eliminating people who rely on cash to buy, a banana or an apple or a cup of coffee from being able to transact. And so these are things from a financial inclusion perspective and governance that kind of weigh on my mind a lot as we start moving this way.
Great. Thanks very much, Laura. And we're out of time. We have one more question, but I think we're going to be out of time. So I'm going to give it all one final go around for closing thoughts, or I think Margaret, as you once said, closing shots. And so where do you hope to see, or where do you hope we will be? What should we accomplish in the next 2 to 3 years? Maybe a rapid fire. Let's start with you, Sukh.
For sure. My hope is that all of people around the table, organizations around the world, take more active part in making the digital economy more inclusive and accessible, and taking a more proactive stance around things that our consumers are already asking of us, and that is around climate change and giving back more than we take from the environment. So, the Priceless Planet Coalition that I mentioned, Laura, these kind of initiatives are only made possible when everybody comes together. The goal of planting 100 million trees in the next 5 years, that's a very clear-cut kind of ambition that we have, along with several others. But I want to give the floor to the others as we're running on time, a certain time. So,
thanks, Sukh. Laura.
I'd like to see more of the financial institutions coming together to address things like capital markets funding of certain industries and so on. Like I don't think that any one of us can make a stance individually, because unless the other institutions come along with us. So I think that we need to see a lot more collaboration amongst the different companies within the industry to address the bigger issues.
Great. Pamela.
Yeah, I would like to see the majority of global businesses focusing on total value creation and what that means. And so they're very aware of what they're taking away from either society, the environment, and ensuring that the net there, it's a global add rather than a subtract, because I think the days of the win-lose are, if not over. I think healthy competition is important. I think that we need to make sure that all businesses take a much more holistic view of how they conduct their businesses.
Thanks. And final word to you, Margaret, before we close out.
So I'd like to see in the coming couple of years that the governance elements bake in the metrics that make this how we do business and how we innovate, so that we're constantly trying to solve the problems that we've been talking about today while serving customers and making a profit for our shareholders.
Great. So on that note, I'll wrap it up for us with first a big thank you to all of you who joined in this panel today. It was educational, inspirational, and very informative, and very aligned with, I think, the objectives of what we were trying to accomplish here today. So hopefully the audience agrees. The closing thought is, I think when we look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we know that those are going to be our goalposts for the next 10 years. And we also know that these problems, and hopefully, it was demonstrated through the conversation today, really, it takes a village. It's not going to be solved by any one organization, country, segment, industry. And so if we've given ideas and insights in terms of how to join, collaborate, I think collaboration was also a key theme of today, then that would be the objective. And looking forward to continuing the conversation with the financial services industry, with our payments experts, and big thank you to Women in Payments for hosting this topic here today. So thank you all, and have a great day.